So, Taiwan. Before going to Taiwan, I knew it was going to be different than what I was used to here in the US, but I didn't really realize what that different would entail. And the thing that stood out to me the most was how Taiwan lives with so many contradictions. How these differences live side by side on the street without ever clashing. And it's that contrast, that contradiction, that manages to still be in harmony that really stood out to me about Taiwan. One second, I'll be walking past a 300-year-old temple, and the next I'm in a sleek mall, watching someone order Demon Slayer-themed boba tea. Tradition and pop culture, stillness with chaos. Taiwan never tried to hide its contradictions, it embraced them. And honestly, this contrast was really exciting for me to see. The trip was so much more than sightseeing. It was like stepping into a living mosaic, where each piece on its own looks so different, but once you stand back, you can see it makes this whole new piece of art that blends completely. So, the part about Taiwanese culture that drew me in the most wasn't flashy or dramatic. It was subtle, it was gentle, it lived in the background, but once I noticed it, I couldn't stop. It's the quiet respect that's woven into everyday life. Just like how when you're on the MRT, people will make sure to stand on one side of the escalator so people in a rush can get by on the other side. They don't need to be asked, this kind of respect is just woven in. I remember I could be walking into Taoist or Buddhist temples, and the air will be thick but still not silent, but peaceful. And I'm not sure what everything means. I can barely read the handwriting on the walls. I can barely read any parts of the inscriptions. But still, somehow, these places were not intimidating or exclusive. They were calm and sacred, but still very open. It invited us to slow down and breathe. And yet, a day later, I would be in a Studio Ghibli store with pastel shells, Totoro plushies, lighting everywhere, and it felt like a dollhouse made for grown-ups, quite honestly. And everything was just so meticulously arranged. You could feel the love and care in how people planned out these shelves. That shift from these sacred temples to these commercialized stores, it should have felt like whiplash, but it didn't. Both spaces, in their own way, were very deeply intentional, thoughtfully designed. They were sincere. There was no contradiction, just two expressions of the same cultural value. Beauty without purpose, and caring without any pretense. And people always met me halfway. No rush, no judgment, just grace. And that kind of moment builds trust fast. And of course, not everybody was 100% nice. However, the majority of the people that I met were always willing to compromise. Every time I make a purchase, for example in Shein and Dean, some interactions that might have felt awkward in the US, like I was bothering someone, in Taiwan felt very human. The staff didn't make me feel like a hassle. They were patient, understanding, warm. It was more communal than transactional, and of course, I understand a lot of that is, so you buy the products, but at the same time, as a consumer, it is a bit of a comfort. I'm someone who is usually pretty high energy. I'm bouncing between things, but I still do crave space. Space to just be. Taiwan somehow gave me both. It let me move quickly between what I wanted to, but it also often invited me to slow down without making me feel like I was falling behind. And in that balance, the quiet alongside the vibrance, the sacred beside the silly, that made me fall in love with this culture. It's not a loud kind of hospitality, it's not performative, it just is. And it's in those quiet, understanding moments that I felt the most at peace on this trip. Taiwan may not always make the loudest sound on the world stage, but its impact is still undeniable. Regionally, it's this glowing symbol of what a modern Asian democracy can look like. Flawed, of course, but also deeply committed to its people, its values, and carving its own path, even under international pressure. In East Asia, where the political landscape can be a bit rigid, Taiwan stands out by simply existing the way it does. It embraces civic engagement. It has protests and pride parades, elections and remembrance, and those are all part of daily life. It doesn't try to outmuscle its neighboring countries, it simply holds its grounds with such poise. Economically, Taiwan is a bit of a quiet giant. It's home to TSMC, the company behind the microchips that basically run the modern world. Every phone, computer, car probably relies on some of this Taiwanese innovation. But it's not flashy with it. It's humility mixed with its impact. It's kind of what I was thinking was a Taiwanese signature, which is very different, especially coming from the USA. But what sometimes people overlook is Taiwan's cultural power, its soft power. Bubble tea didn't just stay local, it exploded globally. Taiwanese dramas, indie music, visual artists are carving out their own space in Asia's creative ecosystem. Even on my trip, I saw how aesthetics were everywhere, from the temple murals to the train station architecture to the vibes of the cafes I visited. And maybe most importantly, Taiwan is proof that a small island with a complex past can still shape the future. That identity doesn't have to be one thing. That tradition and progress don't have to cancel each other out. They coexist. Taiwan on a global stage doesn't demand attention, but it does deserve it. Now, coming from the US, I expected a culture shock, of course, but it was kind of more of a recalibration. It isn't a jarring clash of worlds, but kind of a retuning of my pace, the way I speak, the way I listen. I found myself listening more, doing my best to listen more, reading the room, letting silence breathe, not necessarily rushing so much. It taught me stillness isn't really about being passive, it means being aware, and awareness is powerful. But for all the differences, I could still see familiarity. People filming dance covers, little kids running through the parks, grandparents sitting on benches watching the world go by. I think both Taiwanese and American cultures care a lot about self-expression, but they express it in different ways. In Taiwan, expression feels quieter, more curated. Aesthetics matter. It's the layout of a shop, or the way people present themselves. Back home here, we tend to value boldness. Expression is loud, assertive, often verbal. And it made me ask myself, do I really need to be loud to be heard? Can softness be its own kind of presence? I started noticing my own habits, how much I interrupt, how quickly I move on, how often I fill silence out of discomfort. Being in a culture doesn't reflect me back immediately, gave me space to see who I actually am outside of habit or convenience. The biggest surprise wasn't the food or the sights or even the language, it was how approachable everything felt, even the deeply historical things. I thought I'd be a passive observer standing at the distance, but Taiwan didn't keep me on the outside. Instead, I was swept up in the rhythm of it all. I didn't always understand the lyrics or the melody to the song Taiwan was singing, but I could still hum along. Maybe it's because Taiwanese culture isn't about performance, it's about participation. You don't need credentials to bow at a temple, to taste something new at a night market, to sit on the steps of a museum, and just feel time move by. I struggled to pick the unforgettable moment, because there was just so many moments I'm holding dear to my heart. Maybe it's a time that I went with friends to a museum and got to learn about how Taiwan makes art from its own perspective. Or maybe it was smaller, while sharing conversations with people who aren't really great at English while I'm not really great at Chinese. Laughing, connecting despite it all, and that warmth that we share doesn't necessarily need translation. And maybe that's also what Taiwan taught me. Meaning doesn't always come from grand moments or clear explanations. Sometimes it's found in small, quiet things. I didn't have to belong in the way I thought I did. I didn't have to be perfectly understood, or be fluent, or native, or anything at all. I just had to be there, be present, and be open. Now, to understand how Taiwan became this blended culture, you kind of have to go back to Taiwan's history. It isn't very long, but it's deeply layered. The first people on this land were the indigenous Austronesian tribes, whose languages, crafts, and cosmologies are still alive today, even if it is under-recognized. Their influence lingers in place names, traditional festivals, and ongoing movement for visibility and rights. Then came the Dutch and the Spanish in the 1600s, bringing trade routes, Christian missions, and a very different kind of contact with the world. Their presence didn't last long, but it cracked open the door to globalization. And the idea of Taiwan as a strategic crossroads. When the Qing dynasty took over, Taiwan was pulled closer in the orbit of imperial China. Han migration intensified, temples were built, customs took root, and many of Taiwan's most recognizable traditions became part of daily life. But even then, it wasn't homogeneous. Taiwan was a patchwork of cultures learning to live alongside each other. And then the Japanese came. From 1895 to 1945, colonization meant modernization. But on Japan's terms, they built roads, railways, public health systems, and schools. Today, you can still see it in some of the tiled rooftops of train stations, or Japanese subtitles on some signs. Colonization wasn't just infrastructure, it was also identity suppression. Japanese became the language of instruction, Shinto shrines were constructed, and yet many Taiwanese people developed a complicated nostalgia for this period, not because it was just, but because it brought order and systems that still work. After World War II, everything began to flip. The Nationalist Party arrived from mainland China, Mandarin was enforced, Japanese banned, and once again the cultural script changed. This era once again brought upon political suppression, yes, but it was also a flood of Chinese intellectuals, artists, and teachers that created another cultural layer, one that clashed with what came before, but also added to it. And the wild thing is, Taiwan didn't erase these chapters, it absorbed them. You can walk past a Japanese-era building, hear Chinese songs, pass indigenous street art, and get bubble tea from a shop with an English name all in the same afternoon. In many places, colonization only wounds or ruins, but in Taiwan, it left architecture, language shifts, aesthetic sensibilities, and questions about identity, belonging, and what it means to be Taiwanese. Taiwan never had the luxury of a single story, but maybe that's the point. Instead of picking one version of itself, Taiwan became something richer, a collage. And in that collage, every layer, even the painful ones, tells a story worth remembering. At the end of the day, Taiwan taught me that harmony doesn't mean sameness. It's about balance. You can have neon lights in century-old temples, street vendors and skyscrapers, K-pop dance covers, and traditional drum performances, existing not in opposition but in conversation. Taiwanese culture is full of contradictions, but these contradictions and contrasts enrich the culture. And this gives me hope, because I'm full of contradictions too. I'm someone who's loud yet introspective. I love soft aesthetics, but I carry a lot of inner fire. In Taiwan, I saw that you don't have to resolve every tension in yourself. Sometimes they just make you more whole. So thank you, Taiwan, for showing me contradictions don't need fixing, they just need understanding. And sometimes they make the most beautiful point.